Do you remember that episode of Friends when Rachel and Phoebe hastily organized a surprise bridal shower for Monica? In a last-minute scramble, they realized they needed to throw a party to celebrate Monica's upcoming wedding. In their rush, everything was pulled together in a hurry. Unfortunately, the end result was a disastrous surprise, as the guest list included an accountant Monica had fired 3 years prior, and a few very unfamiliar faces, individuals of little significance to Monica. The situation reached its lowest point when Monica unknowingly criticized everyone present upon her arrival, not realizing they were hiding as part of the surprise. The entire event turned into an unmitigated disaster, leaving everybody with an unpleasant experience. So why am I talking about Friends when the episode is about podcasts? This disastrous RSVP blunder scenario in Friends can definitely relate to your podcast. Let me explain. See, throwing together a podcast episode and loading it to the podcast listening apps without taking planned steps to find the right audience and drive more podcast clicks will get you, well, an unmitigated disaster, leaving an unpleasant experience for everybody, including yourself. Without taking some necessary steps, you'll find your podcast being listened to by the wrong people who accidentally got invited or AKA stumbled onto your podcast unknowingly and who don't love your podcast the way your target audience will. This could actually lead to lower retention rate, lower review scores, and this ultimately means you may experience the listening app's algorithm punishing you. No, I don't mean to scare you. In fact, I know exactly how you can fix this and get the right people to Monica's bridal shower. I mean, your podcast party. So what can you do? The answer to driving more podcast clicks is SEO, also known as search engine optimization. Think of SEO as the best invitation in town. And if you do it right, everybody is going to want to RSVP because of it. When you improve your podcast SEO, you can significantly improve your podcast clicks, which leads to growth in listenership and subscribers. Checking off 3 of the key performance indicators you should be after when you have a podcast. So get ready to learn what SEO is and how you can use it for your podcast. And I promise, I am about to make it so much easier to understand than most. So let's get into it. But first, thank you for joining me today. I'm Jamie Kennedy, executive podcast producer at Brave Moon Podcasts. We've produced podcasts for Virgin Active Health Clubs, Functional Training Institute, well-being coaches and speakers, and many more. I'm including all of the insider secrets I've learned along the way being a podcast producer for some of the top health and fitness brands on the charts today. So whether you're a small business owner, health and fitness professional, or a wellness enthusiast looking to boost your brand through podcasting, this podcast is for you. For a comprehensive list of the equipment and software my clients use, head to my website and grab my free Start a Podcast guide. I've condensed months of research into this guide, offering you the industry's best choices. Download it today. The link is in the show notes. Now, let's jump into it. So what is SEO? SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, which basically means your goal is to ensure the words you share online help you get found on search engines, like Google. When we're talking about SEO for podcasts, the search engines are actually expanded. It's not just about Google and other search engines nobody really knows about, sorry Yahoo, but it's also about the listening apps. See, podcasts are searchable in listening apps, making them a search engine in their own right. So when we're talking SEO for podcasts, we're talking about Google and listening apps like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. These are the big listening apps in 2023, but if you're listening to this in future years, know this list will adapt and change. Now that we know the goal of SEO, I think it's really important for you to understand how search engines actually work. See, search engines like Google work by navigating billions of web pages on the internet. These search engines use tools, creepily called spider and crawlers, to crawl through the web. They then follow links to find new pages. Once they find a new web page, they index it meaning analyze, organize, and store it to be searched for more efficiently. Once a web page is indexed, the web pages are ranked based on a specific user query. So every brand's goal, every podcast's goal, is to rank higher than competitors in the searches that their target audience, or in this case, dream listener, would search for. I'm going to start with a non-podcast example for you, just so you can really understand SEO from the bigger picture. So let's say that you're a yoga studio owner in San Francisco, California, close to my hometown. Your goal is to be ranked number 1 in the Google search for keywords or key phrase searches, such as yoga studio San Francisco or yoga San Francisco. There are a plethora of ways to get your yoga studio ranked higher in the search pages, but ultimately it comes down to 3 things. Number 1, adding those relevant keywords in your website content. So adding keywords that your target audience is searching for in the Google search bar. Number 2, regularly creating and publishing high quality, informative, and engaging content related to yoga, the yoga studio, and topics of interest that your target audience loves or is interested in. And number 3, building a strong online presence by encouraging other reputable websites and directories to link back to your site, as well as engaging with your audience on social media, which ultimately drives more traffic to your website, which Google and search engines love and will reward you for by moving you up in the search directory. Now we'll jump into the context of podcast SEO because the principles are very similar. Just as search engines index and rank web pages, listening apps also index and rank podcast episodes. This means that when a potential listener searches for a topic or keyword related to your podcast, you want your episode to be among the top results. They also favor podcasts that are visited most frequently and also podcasts that are creating and publishing high quality and engaging content. To achieve these things, similar to the yoga studio I mentioned, you'll need to apply SEO strategies, but specific to your podcast. You'll want to add relevant keywords to your podcast title, podcast description, your episode show notes, and episode titles, as well as create high quality and engaging content that appeals to your dream listeners, and actively promoting your podcast to increase its visibility. Furthermore, gaining positive reviews and ratings can enhance your podcast's credibility in search results. As search engines take user feedback into account, having a loyal and satisfied listener base can improve your rankings. You'll also want to make sure you're adding written content about your podcast on the internet, so that you're not only driving new listeners through the podcast listening apps, but also, surprise, surprise, Google too. As of now, search engines do not index audio, meaning search engines like Google do not listen to your audio content. Unfortunately, this means search engines on their own can't help people find your podcast, which is why writing about your podcast on your website, on web pages, on social media, on other people's websites, it's so important. Everything you write about in your podcast should be SEO driven. So how do you actually know what keywords to use? Choosing the right keywords for your podcast is a crucial step in podcast SEO. To identify the most relevant and effective keywords, you can follow these steps. First, start by understanding your target audience and what they are likely to search for. Consider their interests, problems, and questions related to your podcast's topic. What are they searching for? The best way to think about it is when you're searching for something that you need, something that you want to be educated on, something that you want or desire, what do you type into Google or Spotify? If your dream listener is struggling with weight loss, for example, they're probably typing something like how to lose weight into Spotify to find the right podcast episode for them. So start brainstorming a list of potential keywords and phrases that are directly related to your podcast's content. Think about common terms. industry-specific jargon, and synonyms that people might use when searching for your niche or topic. If one of them that you come up with is how to lose weight, then go ahead and go to keyword research tool websites and ask for other related keywords that people are searching for. Write them down and make sure that you're adding these to your podcast title, podcast description, and show notes. I'll include a few of my favorite keyword research tool websites in the show notes, so check there. If you're feeling a little lost, you can cheat a little. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Go ahead and study a few podcasts that are similar to yours. Identify the keywords they are targeting and the ones that appear in their episode titles, descriptions, and transcripts. This can give you a sense of what's working for others in your niche. Now, ideally, your target audience differs slightly from other podcasts out there, but you'll get a general idea of what keywords they're using for similar topics. And even though your podcast name and main podcast description don't change often, if at all, your episode show notes are a good excuse every time to add more keywords and variations. Many podcasters throw this step away, not realizing the potent power of your show notes. Every single episode description is searchable. And not to mention, you can easily turn your show notes into a blog article, which can be added to your website and be indexed by Google and other search engines. There is so much opportunity to get each individual episode ranked by both the listening apps and Google and search engines. So make sure you're taking advantage of all of it. If you're looking for help with your show notes, a couple things. First, Podcastle offers automatic transcription with every single recording that you put onto Podcastle. Simply record in Podcastle, and then once you go into the editing space, click on transcribe, and it will immediately show up with a full transcription of every single episode that you create. Now, keep in mind there are definitely going to be grammatical issues, so you'll want to do a thorough check on everything within those transcriptions before you put it up on the World Wide Web. Second idea with show notes is to use a platform like podcastmarketing.ai. This is a show notes generator that helps create really powerful show notes in a very short amount of time. You'll still want to make sure you're doing your keyword research separately from this and prompting podcastmarketing.ai with the keywords that you want to include in those show notes. Links to both of those things are in my show notes. Now, here are 5 hacks to rank your podcast higher. Hack number 1, select an optimized podcast name. Since the average podcast name is 29 characters or less, or 4 words or less, you want to be sure your podcast name is well thought out. So get specific on a podcast name and choose words that aren't too broad. For example, let's say you are a nutritionist and want to create a podcast about nutrition. We don't recommend you use the title, The Nutrition Podcast. You don't want to pick a topic too broad that is exceptionally competitive. Instead, get more specific. This really comes down to discovering your niche, right? So who is your dream listener? If it's for vegans who want to find inspiration to live more vegan, name it something along the lines of plant-based inspired life. Are you struggling to define your podcast niche and name? It's time to get specific and cater to your ideal audience. We have a brainstorming template on my website that can help you discover the perfect niche and name. Link is in the show notes. Hack number 2, make a dedicated podcast website. Ideally, this website is something that you own. Yes, your podcast hosting platform will create a podcast webpage for you, but there's a huge benefit to you owning your own website. Firstly, your podcast owns more real estate when you have both web pages, for example. But also, you can personalize your own podcast website a lot more. You can also add more content than a standard podcast host webpage would have for your podcast. So consider platforms like Wix, WordPress, and Squarespace for your podcast site. These options help you present your podcast professionally and connect with a wider audience. Hack number 3, get on top of trending topics. Beyond your basic keywords for your niche, it's even more amazing if you're creating episodes related to current trending events and topics that are being searched for. 2 amazing websites to check out what's trending are Uber Suggest by Neil Patel and Google Trends. You can easily find trending topics related to your niche that are currently being searched for. Ultimately, this will help you choose topic ideas for podcast episodes that potential listeners are searching for right now. Hack number 4, optimize your episode title. Your episode title should be rich with keywords your target audience is searching for. Examples might be vegan diet or plant-based recipes. You should use a platform like Google Keyword Planner or Google Bard to find well-searched keywords, but also that are low in competition. It's key to being found. Hack number 5, interview guests with large platforms. One of the fastest ways to grow your audience is by using the power of existing platforms. So try to interview guests that have a larger platform than yours. This works in 2 ways. First, the guests will hopefully share your episode on their platforms. And secondly, when a listener searches for podcast episodes featuring that particular guest, your episode will appear and new listeners will tune in. There you have it. Thank you again so much for joining me on your podcasting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It helps people like you find this podcast as well. Until the next episode, keep those conversations flowing and keep being the amazing powerhouse that you are. And as always, remember that consistency, authenticity, and promoting your podcast are key to your success. Happy podcasting.